Welcome back to Get Down to Business, the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. I'm super excited to talk about something that is certainly very timely. Across the globe, we're facing mind-boggling, complex challenges: climate change, food insecurity, systemic racism, so many issues. But we're going to talk about climate change because the Pew Research Center study recently showed that 72% of respondents fear that climate change will harm them in the future, yet a mere 46% have any confidence in our efforts to reduce it. Here to join me is David Ehrlichman, who is the author of the book, Impact Networks, Create Connections, Spark Collaboration, and Catalyze Systemic Change. David, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. So I'd like to get to know the person behind the microphone. Tell us how you got involved in this work and what inspired you to write this book.
Sure. Yeah. Many years ago, 15 years or so, I knew I wanted to work for purpose, for impact in my career. And so I started to work in a nonprofit like many. And it was an incredible nonprofit doing wonderful work. But I recognized that it was really addressing the symptoms of a larger broken system. It was providing men and women without shelter with culinary training and getting them jobs in the culinary industry. But again, working this massive broken system. So I started to get curious about how we could create impact at a systemic level. How can we address the root causes of the issues that lead to homelessness and all the other things that we'll talk about today? And I started to first work at Monder Institute and then focus my career on cross-sector collaborations. How can multiple organizations work together to address issues that are bigger than themselves? That we need to work across sectors, we need to work across boundaries. And collaboration, people know or think they know how to go about that, but I think we often go about it all wrong. Maybe we'll dig into that.
Absolutely. So I know in your daytime, because I know you're probably writing books late at night, but in the daytime, you're the co-founder and coordinator of Converge, a network of system strategists, designers, facilitators, educators, and evaluators committed to co-creating that word that you just said, that impact, that positive impact. And you're doing some fantastic work. So you say in your book that networks are all around us, and whether we're aware of them or not. What can we learn from seeing and understanding the networks around us?
And there are all kinds of networks. Networks are just webs of relationships that connect people or things. There are networks in our brains of neurons. There are networks that make up the internet, the routers and cables. There are networks underneath our feet when we walk in a forest, the mycelium and the fungal networks that connect trees and plants together to share resources. We've all heard of social networks, the people we come in contact with and communicating online or in person. But what many people don't realize is that we can actually deliberately organize and sustain networks, not just for connection, but also for collective learning, collective action, and to connect social movements that have a huge impact across large fields.
Wow. So you say that approaches that we've used to address simple and complicated issues are falling short when it comes to dealing with complex and chaotic issues. That's certainly very true right now. And you continue, what got us here is not going to get us where we need to go. Can you explain that approach, especially as it relates to current events?
Yeah, of course. People and organizations embark on collaborative efforts all the time. I think they know how to do that, but typically really frustrated by the results. And two reasons in particular: often they're trying to structure the collaboration like they would a single organization, as a hierarchy with some central authority guiding the work, with people fitting into specific roles to move it forward. And they try to plan it all out in advance, identifying specific and measurable outcomes for the effort before people have even had a chance to connect and start to have conversations, start to work together. This approach only works if we already know what needs to be done and how to do it. But the thing is, complex issues are experienced very differently by different people. People are affected by these issues in different ways. They'll see things really differently depending on where they stand. And so in our work together to address complex issues, these multifaceted, nonlinear issues, many that you mentioned earlier, we can't plan it all out in advance. Instead, we need to bring different actors, different organizations together to make sense of the issue collectively, to strengthen our ability to share information, to share resources, to coordinate our work, the things that are already happening, and then to collaborate together to affect the whole system in ways that no one group could on their own. And that's really what it means to build a network for impact.
Okay, so let's dig in a little bit more into those words, impact networks. So you talk about this probably day and night, impact networks, and how I am curious to understand again that true definition. You've sort of touched on this already. Impact networks, what are they, and how are they different from other kinds of networks that probably our listeners are more commonly associated with, like social networks? And so teach us a little bit.
Absolutely. Impact networks are networks that bring individuals and organizations together for learning and collaborative action on a shared purpose. So, as you mentioned, there are social networks. Social networks are usually formed organically as we become in contact with different people. Social networks are all about connection, but impact networks start there, but then say we can actually layer on structures and processes and more deliberately organize the network to support not only connection, but also flow of communication, flow of information, flow of resources, and learning. So one type of impact network are learning networks, networks that connect many people and organizations together to deliberately increase the flow of information and learning on a common issue. We can take that a step further, say we're not just interested in connection and learning, but also action. How do we actually collaboratively take action together on things that are bigger than ourselves? For example, there's a network in California that's connecting the work of many other initiatives to support local stewardship or local conservation efforts that connect them across a statewide level so that collectively, through the power of their collective voice, they can change policy at a statewide level. That wouldn't be possible with a single organization. We can take that even a step further, not just networks for connection and learning and action, but also to create a larger social movement by connecting multiple different networks together. And that's what's called a movement network. So the different forms of impact networks, but it's all about creating connection, learning, and action around a shared purpose.
I'm chatting with the subject matter expert on impact networks. That's David Ehrlichman, who's the co-founder of Converge, and he's written the book, Impact Networks Create Connection, Spark Collaboration, and Catalyze Systemic Change, which is something I know every one of our listeners certainly are vigorously nodding their heads and saying, yes, we need that, regardless of how big or how small our organizations are. So, David, I'd like to, in all of our shows and with all of the opportunities that we have to talk with leaders like yourself, to talk about an action item, something that our listeners can put into place in the week or month ahead. So, what does leadership look like in this context of navigating the unknown, which it seems like everything is unknown right now? What critical skills do leaders need this age of complexity? What can they put in place in the week ahead?
So, Lee, what I would encourage people to do is to think about the work or the issue that you really care about. In most cases, organizational leaders will put their own organization, their own mission at the center of their focus. That's totally understandable. But instead, try putting that mission, that purpose at the center of your focus, and start to think about all the other actors and stakeholders and community groups that also care about or touch on that issue in some way. And then the question is, what can you do to strengthen your connections with those different stakeholders, to strengthen the flows of information between them? What might be possible together that you couldn't do alone? That is really the first step in embracing what we call a network mindset, recognizing the interconnectivity of our world. And then network leadership is really intentionally supporting our ability to create connection and learning and action. And that means starting to form relationships with folks. That means creating spaces where people can come together to have conversations they don't usually have with people they don't usually have them with. Embracing emergence, as you said, not trying to plan it all in advance, but instead starting with the relationships and the purpose, and then building structures around that to support our ability to work together. That's where to start.
I love it. I love it. And I know that on your website, converge.net, I know you have a great blog. You've got some great information, but you also have a great book, as we've been mentioning, Impact Networks Create Connection, Spark Collaboration, and Catalyze Systemic Change. That book is written by our guest, David Ehrlichman. So David, final word goes to you. How can people get in touch with you and your team and pick up a copy of this book?
Absolutely. Well, do check out converge.net. We have lots of resources on there, lots of free resources that we give away through Creative Commons license. We also have network leadership trainings, different formats. We have free webinars. We have 3-hour workshops. We have an 8-session deeper dive training. There you can also find the book, Impact Networks, converge.net/book. And in 2 weeks, we are going to be releasing a documentary short called Impact Networks, 20-minute film. It'll be on our website as well. I encourage you to check that out.
Absolutely. For all those that have trouble focusing with the many distractions around them. But I know it's going to be a great short documentary. So be sure to get on converge.net, because I know all that information is going to be shared there on the social networks, which is one type of networks as we've learned about in this conversation. David Ehrlichman, thank you so much for joining us. We've got to squeeze in a quick break, some headlines, commercials. When we come back, more small business jobs and entrepreneurship on Get Down to Business. We'll be right back.